Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
When Julia Roberts sat down at the View table that morning, the mood was light, coffee cups in hand, polite smiles all around. Sitting across from her was Kylie Kelce, the poised and outspoken wife of NFL star Jason Kelce, there to discuss sports culture, family, and fame. But what started as friendly banter about game day traditions quickly turned into a tense, unfiltered exchange that nobody saw coming. Julia, America's sweetheart for over 3 decades, made a pointed remark about how some people ride their partner's fame instead of building their own. Kylie, never one to back down, leaned forward with a cool smile and replied, "And some people live in a bubble so long they forget what the real world looks like." The air went thick. Joy Behar froze mid-sip. Whoopi raised her eyebrows. The live audience sat up in their chairs. Viewers at home could feel the temperature in the studio spike. Within minutes, the conversation spiraled from polite disagreements into a raw, personal clash about privilege, identity, and who really earns their place in the spotlight. And when Julia dropped a line so sharp it made the crowd gasp, Kylie's comeback was equally unforgettable, sparking one of the View's most talked-about moments of the year. The Thursday morning sun streamed through the glass walls of the View's Manhattan studio, catching flecks of dust in the air that danced like stage lights over the host's polished table. Julia Roberts, effortlessly radiant in a tailored cream blazer, took her seat with that trademark megawatt smile, the one that had carried her through decades of Hollywood blockbusters and red carpet moments. Across from her sat Kylie Kelce, poised yet grounded in a forest green dress that complemented her no-nonsense demeanor. She had been making headlines in recent months, part of it for her charitable work, part of it for her candid social media commentary, and, of course, part of it for being married to Philadelphia Eagles legend Jason Kelce. The segment was billed as a lighthearted discussion, game day to glam day, how America celebrates. Joy Behar cracked the first joke, poking fun at herself for never making it through a football game without accidentally napping halfway through. Laughter rolled through the room, Julia chuckling along, Kylie grinning. On the surface, it was all warm, easy, and genial. "Julia, you've been to Super Bowls before, right?" asked Sunny Hostin, leaning forward. Julia laughed, nodding. "Oh yes, and I'll tell you, those games are long. You have to pace yourself. I'm more about the halftime snacks than the actual plays." Kylie smiled politely. "I think that's how a lot of people feel, but for us, the game is the heartbeat of the day." "Exactly," Whoopi chimed in. "It's culture. For some families, Sunday is football." Julia leaned back in her chair, that easy southern drawl softening her words. "Sure, I get that, but it's interesting how much of that culture sometimes revolves around, well, the players and their wives. You see it all over, the glamour, the sideline shots. Sometimes I wonder if it overshadows other parts of life." It was a casual remark, or at least it seemed to be, but the camera caught it, that subtle narrowing of Kylie's eyes just for a beat. Kylie's smile didn't falter, but her tone tightened slightly. "I think it's only overshadowing if you're looking at it that way. For a lot of us, supporting our partners is just part of the picture. We also build our own things, our own careers, our own platforms. People just, well, don't always see the work behind it." Joy jumped in with a quip about paparazzi never following her to the grocery store, drawing another ripple of laughter from the audience. But the energy between Julia and Kylie had shifted, small enough that casual viewers might miss it, sharp enough that the live audience leaned in ever so slightly. Julia, still smiling, gave a little shrug. "Of course. I just think sometimes the media and the public love the image more than the substance. It's not a judgment, just an observation." "Sometimes," Kylie replied, still composed, "the substance is what gets us there, but you'd have to look beyond the headlines to see it." Whoopi's gaze flicked between them like she was watching a tennis match. The other hosts sensed it too, that unspoken awareness that a conversation billed as breezy might have deeper, thornier roots. They moved on to safer ground for a few minutes. Stories about Julia's upcoming indie film, tales from Kylie about organizing a community fundraiser. But even as they laughed about Julia's failed attempt to grill burgers for a charity event, the current between them hummed quietly beneath the surface. When the commercial break signaled the end of the segment, producers bustled in to adjust microphones and touch up makeup. Julia and Kylie exchanged cordial nods, the kind that carried just a trace too much formality. Neither woman said it out loud, but both knew this conversation wasn't done. And when they came back from break, the gloves, figurative though they were, would start coming off. The cameras snapped back on after the break, the studio lights gleaming off the glossy desk. The segment card on the teleprompter read, "The Price of Public Life," a topic meant to explore how fame shapes privacy and relationships. Whoopi, leaning in with that measured tone she uses when she knows a conversation's about to heat up, said, "All right, let's talk about what happens when your personal life becomes everybody else's entertainment. Julia, you've been in the public eye for, 3 decades?" "Almost 4, Julia said with a wry smile. "And I've learned that people think they know you because they've seen you on screen or in magazines. It's surreal. But I also think we sometimes invite that attention without realizing it. We post, we pose, we curate the narrative." Kylie crossed her legs and rested her hands on her lap. "Or," she countered, "we share pieces of our lives because people relate to them. There's a difference between inviting attention and connecting with people who care about your journey." Julia tilted her head slightly, that Hollywood grace still intact. "But do they care about you, or the idea of you? Because I think sometimes the journey is packaged in ways that keep it shiny. You know, Instagram doesn't usually show the messy kitchen or the late-night arguments." Kylie's polite smile thinned. "I think people are smarter than they're given credit for. They know there's more behind a picture. And frankly, I think women, especially in sports, get a little tired of being told they're just a shiny package." That line landed. You could hear it in the sharp inhale from a few audience members. Sunny, sensing the shift, jumped in. "Julia, are you saying Kylie's public image isn't authentic?" Julia held up her hands in mock surrender. "Oh, no. I'm saying in general, celebrity culture thrives on the glossy version. Kylie here may be genuine as the day is long, but I've seen enough to know that when your image is tied to a man who's a public figure, it gets tricky. Are people following you or following him?" Kylie didn't miss a beat. "Well, considering I built my own career before I ever met Jason, I'd say they're following me. And if some came for the football, they stayed for who I am. I'm not a supporting character in my own life." That got an audible from the audience, a mix of approval and anticipation. Julia's smile stayed frozen in place, but the glint in her eyes was unmistakable, that subtle steel she's shown in countless film roles. "Of course not, but you can't deny the spotlight shines brighter when it's reflected off someone else's fame. And for some people, that's convenient." The air tightened. Even Joy Behar's trademark interjections faltered for a moment. Kylie leaned forward slightly, her voice calm, but with an unmistakable edge. "Convenient would be letting other people define me. I don't. I know exactly who I am, and I'm not worried if anyone else is uncomfortable with that." The studio murmured, the kind of live audience reaction that producers live for. Joy finally broke in, trying to lighten the mood. "Well, I'll say this. If the Eagles ever need someone to handle a press conference after a tough game, I'm calling Kylie. She's got the composure." The audience laughed, but the moment didn't dissolve. The tension was there, visible in the way Julia took a sip of water without breaking eye contact, and the way Kylie straightened her posture like she was bracing for round 3. When the segment moved toward audience questions, one fan asked Julia if she thought modern celebrity was more earned or given. Julia's answer was smooth, almost offhand, but it had teeth. Earned, when you've worked for decades to perfect your craft; given, when the culture decides you're interesting for reasons you didn't exactly create yourself. Kylie's reply came without pause. Sometimes the culture decides you're interesting because you're real, and that's something money, fame, or decades in Hollywood can't buy. Whoopi's eyebrows shot up. Oh, we're going to need more time for this one. The camera cut to commercial again, but the live audience could see it. Julia leaning back, still smiling, Kylie's gaze locked on her. Neither woman said a word, but the message was clear. This wasn't just a polite disagreement anymore. The commercial break ended, but the tension didn't. If anything, it had crystallized into something sharper, the kind of unspoken electricity that makes live TV feel dangerous. Whoopi, sensing the audience was hooked, turned directly to Julia. Okay, I'm just going to ask, Julia, what's the line for you? When does sharing your life cross over into selling it? Julia didn't flinch. When the personal becomes a brand. When moments that should be sacred, a child's milestone, an anniversary, even grief, are packaged for consumption. There's a difference between telling your story and using it. Kylie's eyes narrowed just slightly. You think I use my life? Julia's tone was light, but there was no mistaking the target now. I think sometimes we tell ourselves it's connection when really it's marketing. And I think younger generations of public figures are quicker to blur that line, maybe because they've never known life without a camera in their pocket. The studio audience let out a collective, ooh. They knew this was getting personal. Kylie didn't look away. And maybe older generations forget that sharing can be empowering. You talk about sacred moments, but sometimes those moments inspire people. If posting about my postpartum struggles helps another mom feel less alone, why should I keep that locked away just to keep some illusion of privacy? Julia leaned forward. Because there's a cost. And by the time you realize how much you've given away, it's too late to take it back. I've seen marriages, friendships, even families crack under the weight of living in the spotlight. And sometimes, the person you think you are online isn't the person you actually are. Kylie's voice softened, but the emotion in it was raw. I've watched people I love get torn apart by the media, Julia. I've been called names, accused of things I've never done, had strangers show up at my kid's school. And yet, I still believe being open is worth it. Because if I let fear dictate my life, they've already won. The audience broke into spontaneous applause, not polite, but loud and sustained. Whoopi didn't interrupt. She let it wash over the set, then said quietly, all right, that's real talk. Whether you agree with Julia or Kylie, that's what we're here for, hearing the why behind the what. Julia gave a small nod. Fair enough. Kylie's reply was measured, but her eyes were still locked on Julia. Fair enough. The camera began to pull back for the next segment, but the viewers at home and the ones in the studio knew this was the moment people would be talking about for days. Not because of the barbs, but because of the crack in the armor. The moment the red on-air light blinked off for the final time, the set didn't immediately relax. Julia quietly sipped her tea, eyes fixed somewhere far away. Kylie, still seated across from her, kept her posture tall, but her hands were folded tightly in her lap. It wasn't open hostility anymore. It was something quieter. Like two fencers who just realized they'd both landed blows that would bruise later. Sarah Haynes leaned over to Kylie with a low, "Hey, you good?" Kylie smiled tightly. "I'm fine." But she wasn't, and neither was Julia. because outside the bubble of that table, a digital storm was already forming. By the time the crew started breaking down cameras, clips from the segment were already flooding Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Someone had posted the 10-second exchange where Julia said, "By the time you realize how much you've given away, it's too late to take it back." The caption read, "Julia Roberts drops the truth bomb Kylie Kelce didn't want to hear." That clip alone hit 1 million views in the first hour. Not to be outdone, another viral snippet focused on Kylie's tear-tinged words, "If I let fear dictate my life, they've already won." The top comment read, "Kylie just schooled Julia Roberts on living fearlessly." And just like that, the internet drew its battle lines. Hashtag Team Julia versus hashtag Team Kylie. Facebook comment sections turned into mini war zones. Julia's fans praised her for protecting the sanctity of private life and saying what every celebrity's too scared to admit. Kylie's supporters called her brave and a voice for modern women who aren't afraid to live out loud. On Instagram, celebrities began chiming in. Jennifer Aniston posted a photo of her coffee with the caption, "Boundaries are self-respect, always." People weren't sure if it was shade at Kylie or just a coincidence, but the speculation drove even more clicks. Meanwhile, on Twitter, Travis Kelce himself broke his silence with a single tweet. "Proud of you, babe. Keep being real." It instantly racked up hundreds of thousands of likes and a new wave of headlines. By mid-afternoon, The View's official YouTube upload had comments disabled after trolls began spamming insults toward both women. That didn't stop people from screen recording and reposting the entire segment with their own analysis. Podcasters weighed in. Entertainment blogs churned out think pieces with headlines like "Julia versus Kylie, a generational divide in celebrity culture," and "Privacy versus transparency, who's really winning?" Behind the scenes, ABC executives were quietly thrilled. The rating spike was undeniable, social media engagement was through the roof, and the teaser for tomorrow's episode, "We'll address yesterday's fireworks," was already locked in. But for Julia and Kylie, the firestorm was more complicated. Julia's publicist sent her a text, "You're trending worldwide. Be prepared for backlash." Kylie's phone buzzed nonstop with both strangers' praise and strangers' hate. Neither woman posted anything that night, and maybe that silence, in an age of instant reaction, spoke louder than anything they could have said. The next morning, Julia Roberts woke up to sunlight streaming through her kitchen windows and a phone buzzing with missed calls. Friends, journalists, and even her sister had left messages. "You okay? Wow, that was intense yesterday. They're calling it the clash of the year." Julia sat down with her coffee, scrolling through the headlines. Every outlet seemed to have a different take on what had happened. Some painted her as a seasoned Hollywood veteran defending her values. Others cast her as a gatekeeper trying to shut down a younger woman's voice. She didn't regret what she'd said, but she did wonder if Kylie had heard the heart of her point. Julia had lived through the darker corners of fame, the moments when the public thought it owned you. She had wanted to protect Kylie from learning those lessons the hard way. But maybe her delivery had been too sharp. Across the country, in a Philadelphia suburb, Kylie Kelce sat cross-legged on her couch, phone in hand, wearing sweatpants and an oversized hoodie. The chaos online felt almost surreal. She'd been on The View to promote a new charity initiative, but all anyone was talking about was the verbal sparring with Julia Roberts. Replaying Julia's words in her mind, "By the time you realize how much you've given away, it's too late to take it back." Kylie knew Julia meant it as a warning, but to her it still felt like a challenge to her choices, her openness, her way of connecting with people. Still, there was something about Julia's conviction that stuck with her. The woman had survived decades in an industry that chewed people up. Maybe there was something to learn there, even if she didn't agree with all of it. For both women, the clash had left more than bruised egos. It had opened a conversation they weren't done having. Later that week, an unexpected email arrived in each of their inboxes. It was from the View's producers, asking if they'd be willing to return, not for a fight, but for a follow-up discussion. This time, they wanted to go deeper. Privacy versus transparency. Can both coexist? Neither Julia nor Kylie replied right away. They both knew what stepping back into that ring would mean. More headlines, more scrutiny, more pressure to stand their ground. But they also knew something else. Neither was ready to let the other have the final word. Some rivalries end in one fiery moment. Others become a story still being written. And for Julia Roberts and Kylie Kelce, this wasn't the end. Not yet.